Good evening and welcome to the virtual leadership talk titled Boring is Best, Invest in the Right Infrastructure. Tonight's talk is sponsored and supported by the Clergy and Lay Leadership Development Team of the Desert Southwest Conference of the United Methodist Church. My name is Deborah Williams, and as a member of the Clergy and Lay Leadership Development Team, I am privileged to be your host this evening. Our guest presenter is Pastor Jeremy Scott. Jeremy W. Scott is a former software engineer turned pastor and now author. From 2014 to 2018, he served as the Vital Congregations developer for the Mountain Sky area of the United Methodist Church. He supported several new church starts and many more existing congregations striving to be more vital. He has been a local church pastor in Ohio and Montana. Jeremy has a passion for technology and believes that we need to encourage entrepreneurs in our churches to do bold things to reach new people. Today, he is the pastor of the growing church, United Methodist Church of Johnstown in Colorado.
This is great. I've done a couple of these things for folks along the way. Suddenly, the things that I like to talk about are in everybody's mind. So a couple of years, last January, I was invited to give a talk at the LEAD conference, which is a conference happens every year, and it happened to be in Seattle. And I was a little surprised that they accepted my application because I wanted to talk about technology and infrastructure in the church, and why I thought that needed to be considered a more sexy, glamorous topic than I had been being considered at the time. And I didn't know that they were actually going to let me do it, even though I am friends with the organizers, so maybe that's why, I don't know. But then I tried to make the argument that while there are certainly a lot of things in our church and a lot of things in our denomination that we are working on, a lot of kind of things we need to work towards, that, for a while, I have felt that there's some things we've also been neglecting. And one of them is sort of kind of the basic infrastructure pieces that, we as churches rely on to do our job well. And in fact, I've thought that for a long time. It was actually part of my call to ministry back in 2006, even, is having been in software at that point for about 10 years, having watched the internet grow and bloom, having been involved in developing kind of the first generation of online systems for large corporations. One thing I looked around and realized that the church seemed to be kind of missing the boat on a lot of this stuff. So that is one of the things that actually intrigued me about going into ministry in the first place, was seeing that there was going to be, it already was, but there was going to be this need in the church. And then I found a lot of other things I love about doing. I found a lot of other things I love about being a pastor. Baptizing babies, it has to be the best thing. That's hands down is the best thing. Anybody's had a chance to do that, you know what I'm talking about. But it's a passion that stayed with me when I worked for the conference. So worked for the Mountain Sky Conference. It was one of the things that I worked on there, kind of bringing a conference into the 21st century as far as I was concerned. We were doing Zoom meetings long before it was cool in Mountain Sky, basically because I insisted that we do it, and I wasn't going to drive 4 hours for a 2-hour meeting anymore, which is pretty common when your area is all of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. So we had... necessity was the mother of invention for us, for sure. So I've worked with some wonderful churches, got to work with some passionate churches. Technology has certainly been a part of a lot of new church starts work that I was blessed to help with. And then the world kind of changed on us about 18 months ago, and suddenly everybody was interested, and my phone started ringing off the hook. Just people trying to figure out where to go and what to do now. So I want to start just with a little bit of a presentation, kind of an overview, a little bit of the conversation that I was trying to start with my talk at LEAD. But then I really want to dive into, really from kind of less of a kind of conceptual basis of what it looks like to invest in technology or infrastructure in the church, and to a kind of real more practical maybe help share a little bit about what that's meant for us in the last 18 months at our church, what we have learned, both working in our church and working with other churches in our community and helping them through kind of their struggles around it. And then I'd kind of like to conclude with where we're thinking about what we're going to carry forward. Obviously, we're blessed that some things are returning back to normal a little bit. I've got people in my sanctuary again, which I dearly, dearly miss, and I did not like it when they were not there. But we're also facing the reality that probably a third of our people are going to stay online, and I don't know that I think that's just going to be normal now. So we're just trying to figure out what does that mean and where do we go. So we'll kind of finish up by sharing some of the thoughts that we're having and conversations we're having around what that looks like, both within the church, but also within kind of our conference in our area too. I wasn't getting a lot of places with people on the whole, like, let's make infrastructure glamorous and sexy. So I decided to change it up a little bit and just kind of confess that infrastructure is boring. And maybe we need to live into that because maybe boring is best. Maybe that's really what we actually need. And at the end of the day, what we want is we want things we don't have to think about, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you've done your infrastructure work well is when you don't have to think about it. And I know that even back from my software engineering days, we did our job well when nobody called to either complain or compliment, right? When it just became something that they did and just part of their lives and they didn't have to think about it. Rarely did you get compliments, but so long as you weren't getting complaints, it's fine. But the way that I've learned to kind of think about this, and we talked about it back in LEAD, was actually to think of it in other terms of infrastructure, which around here has a lot to do with roads. So Colorado is experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. Johnstown is on the I-25 corridor between Denver and Fort Collins, which is seeing a lot of growth as well. And that means there is road work all the time. Even when I lived in Montana, there was road work all the time. And you don't realize how much you take a road for granted until it is no longer there for you to use, right? So like right now I have a reality where the on-ramp, to I-25 that's closest to my house is closed and the one south of us is closed. It's basically impossible to go south from where I am right now. It's a several mile journey out of my way just to get on I-25 going south, even though I can almost see I-25 from my house. Just because of all the construction. And when you're driving across the road and there isn't a lot of traffic, you just kind of think, well, this is how it is and it's easy to take for granted. And then, when something happens and it messes it all up and we're like, oh yeah, this is more important. The other thing that we often kind of do is we don't realize that sometimes there may even be a faster way. There's also that moment when the road finally reopens. They're doing a lot of expansion work around here. And when you find that faster way, you don't realize how slow your progress had been until you find that new way to go quicker. So I think about it a lot of times when I think about infrastructure period or infrastructure in the church, I kind of think about it in that way is what are the tools that we need to get us to where we want to go as simple as possible and as easy as possible with as least amount of work as possible. Because I think most of us would rather spend our time doing, the ministry and the work of the church, being out there, blessing people, being out there, teaching people to love God, love neighbor, love themselves, and maybe a little less time moving paper around or organizing things or, things like that. So I do have some people in my church that are always there anytime I need to have paper folded. Man, they love it. They love folding paper, and I'm very grateful for that. So infrastructure is really the best infrastructure is the infrastructure you don't notice, because it's just working the way that you want it to. And the truth is that as United Methodists, as Methodists and people in the Wesleyan tradition, our whole movement was born out of an investment in infrastructure. Before John Wesley came onto the scene, there was actually a guy named Ralph Allen. And Ralph Allen's not a name you heard of, even though he had a tremendous impact. But it's kind of an impact we would take for granted. Ralph Allen, at the young age of 24, took over a section of the Royal Mail postal delivery system at a time when it was incredibly inefficient and did not work very well. And through his 70 years, nearly of life and 40 years of service, or 45 years of service with the Royal Mail, he is credited with pretty much single-handedly turning that postal system into a modern postal system that we would recognize today, and the one that Ben Franklin modeled the United States postal system after. And while we might want to throw cracks at the postal system today, the truth is that piece of infrastructure, that ability to move information around through the mail and packages around through the mail, really changed society. So Ralph Allen is credited with that. He improved the efficiency by making it, by first of all, decentralizing it. So he made it so that all the mail had to go through London. It could go a little bit more point to point, which made it both more efficient and quicker, but also made it actually more safer and more reliable because the packages were not traveling as far. He is estimated to have saved, because of his infrastructure investments, 1.5 million pounds over his career. And of course, these are like, 1700s, dollars or pounds, not modern dollars. So quite a bit of money. And one of the main ways he did it is he invested in this new technology of carriages, which had these, which we don't think of by any means being new technology. But there was a day when they were, and they offered a lot of advantages. They could move quicker. They actually had suspension. A lot of wagons didn't, so they could move faster. They also kind of kept things out of the elements in a way that a lot of things couldn't do before. So they really were a significant improvement in how you move things, not just people, but move objects, especially paper, which is obviously very susceptible to things like rain and water, from place to place. And because he did this, and because this infrastructure existed, when John Wesley comes on the scene, one of the reasons why we have so much of the writings and everything that John Wesley did is because it was written down and it was copied and it was sent through the mail and people held on to it. I have an 8-volume set on my desk of Wesley's letters, from his entire lives, because people held on to these things. But it was also the major way he corresponded. This man wrote thousands and thousands and thousands of letters. So the Methodist Church, the Methodist movement throughout England would not have been possible without a secure, modern system for mailing things. One of the things that Wesley himself invested a lot of time and energy was this new idea and the invention of the pamphlet, which we don't think of that as an interesting piece of technology today, but at the time it was bold and it was different, and it wasn't a letter. It was mass produced, but it wasn't a book. It was designed to be short. They sold for very, very small amounts of money. They could be printed up rather cheaply. And so a lot of times when we see things like a lot of John Wesley writings that we preserve today are the length that they are and the format they are, because that's what fit well on a pamphlet. And he would make these up. Part of what he raised money for early in time was to print these up by the thousands and send them through the mail through all these sort of places. So the Methodist Church has never, not only have we not been shy about using new technologies, especially technologies that help us communicate and organize, we're actually born out of it. And this would continue on, when Methodism crossed the pond into the U.S. and really took off. Cokesbury exists for a reason. The publishing house exists for a reason. And at the time, they were the trendiest thing going. There was a time when you can open up the Cokesbury catalog and you could order stained glass windows and blueprints for your church, which is why a lot of Methodist churches around the world look exactly the same, because you could get the plans from, it wasn't quite a Sears catalog kit home, but it was close. But they would get you all those hard to find pieces. So it's been a long time tradition for us to do this and be these people. And Methodist really, the church has been at its best and its most thriving as when we've embraced every tool at our disposal, again, to communicate and organize. And when I think about infrastructure in the life of the church, I think that's really what it's about. And I don't want to belabor the point, but you can honestly take this all the way far back to Jesus if you wanted to. Christianity doesn't survive if the Romans didn't build roads, right? And because Christians walked down the roads that the Romans built. Which is how we communicated and organized 2,000 years ago. This is who we are. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Ralph Allen. He modernized the postal system. You didn't know that. If you learned nothing else this evening, now you know the unspoken hero that is. All right. Now, the other true thing is that the world we live in today is that while they're doing a lot of amazing road improvement near my home, that's great. And they're adding an extra lane, which is great. We need it. Getting between here and Fort Collins is a pain in the butt. That lane is going to be a toll lane. And the truth is, we also live in a world now where there are fast lanes for people who can pay more. So if you're willing to pay, you can basically skip over the line that everyone else is waiting in. And this is true whether you're going to a concert. This is true no matter what you're doing. We live in a world where there are resources out there. There are infrastructure out there, but the infrastructure isn't always being allocated, equitably. Because we've grown beyond. We've grown beyond one stamp, one letter, kind of thing, and now that's the case. And one of my concerns, this is my soapbox moment for all of this. One of my concerns I have for us, more as a denomination than anything, is that when it comes to things like the infrastructure that we need to communicate and organize, we have inequity masquerading as choice. And what I mean by that, yes, there are no ends of systems. We'll talk about a couple tonight, and no ends of ways you can go out to organize your church, or, software services you can purchase and buy. And then some of the lines is, that it's supposedly an advantage, that you can go off and get off the shelf exactly what you want and don't have to just do what everyone else is doing. That's fine if you have the means to afford it. And some of these systems are rather expensive. You have the expertise to evaluate what it is that you actually need versus what you don't. And the truth is that a lot of the tools that many of us are needing to deploy today, few people actually have the technical expertise to evaluate, are they getting the right tool for what they need to get, for what they are trying to accomplish. Some congregations are large enough that they can just invest in outside help to make those decisions. Some churches are blessed to have somebody maybe within the church that has some experience in these matters. What I have learned through COVID, and again, me being kind of known for this stuff in my area, I think every district superintendent in my conference has referred multiple people to me when they get questions they don't know how to answer. Some of them about some just very basic technology. And the thing that became quickly apparent to me that I suspected before, but is now completely true, is that even medium and even our larger churches, struggle to know even what the options are, what's even possible. What makes a good system, what makes a bad system, what features or benefits are actually helpful, which are not going to be helpful, what's a good price to pay, what's not a good price to pay. Things simply don't exist. The other thing we are missing out on, by not making this a problem that we are tackling together, is the ability to negotiate with some of these providers as a much larger entity. I have no ability as a church my size. I have to take what I'm being offered. I have no ability to negotiate price or features or anything, with any potential vendor of services. Some of the biggest players in some of the spaces we're going to talk about brag about having, 15,000 churches, in their portfolio. Well, there's 30,000 Methodist churches or something like that, I think, right, still currently across the United States. Our ability to do that. So, I have had many conversations with GCFA folks and all sorts of folks about this, and they all smile and nod and go, I'm looking forward to do that post-pandemic. We haven't had one of those conversations in a while. I'm curious what they'll say to me now. But my soapbox moment for you that I can't solve and that we can't solve is, at some point there's a decision that will need to be made at a level much higher than mine about is if we're going to care about these things in a way where we can start bringing these things to everybody. Because the one thing, every Walmart has the same point of sale system. for a reason. So unfortunately, we're not given that right now. And frankly, what I find fascinating is there are very few. I have yet to cover a single denomination really who has taken this on, which I think is a shame, because I don't think it's in the spirit of who we've been and what we have done before. So the truth is, what we have to understand now is that, like it or not, whether it's equitable or not, whether we like, whether it's fair or not, we do live in this world where churches are sort of left to provide for themselves. Some conferences have gone and done some vetting and have like a recommended list of various products and services that people may want to consider, and those are worthwhile. And there definitely are some kind of primary providers that do better. I will name also one of the other challenges is because we haven't done this work, and because frankly mainline Protestant churches have been slow to the technical thing in the first place. One of the other challenges that you will run into when you go look at some of these products and services that are available out there is a lot of them are going to come kind of defaulted to a more non-denominational or kind of evangelical language and bent to them. And it doesn't mean that we can't take advantage of it. It doesn't mean we can't tweak them to use what we need to do. But that is a challenge because, the early adopters around a lot of this stuff was not us. The early adopters around this are the ones that really got to set the tone for a lot of the products and services you can find today, that those were set by, for stuff that's anything that's church specific, tended to be more your non-denominational churches who were investing in these places when we were not. So what does that look? Well, hold on. All right. So yeah, so we'll do this slide, then I'm going to pause. So what do I mean by the total lane? So the things that are available that I think provide not only nice to have, but frankly required infrastructure that any and every local church, especially any local church that really wants to focus on any kind of outreach, any kind of work in their community in that kind of way. What are those infrastructure pieces that I think everybody needs? One is everybody needs a cloud-based church management system, and this is actually an update. Post in the pre or during and COVID world. I would have just said church management system maybe before. But really, it needs to be a cloud-based one. We need to be able to access the data of our church and have people work on that data from anywhere. That was already important pre-COVID. It was desperately important during COVID. If your membership data and all your contact information was, locked up, either on paper in your church that wasn't doing you a lot of good, or if it was locked up in a program that resided only on one computer that, lived in the office in the church. Frankly, that wasn't doing a lot of good either. And especially now that people are used to working from home, that's become a thing. What we've noticed strongly in our church is that people want to volunteer from home. They'll volunteer, but maybe they want to come pick some up, take it home, or we have a lot more success actually recruiting volunteers if they can volunteer from home. One of the greatest things that we had already done, pre-COVID, that was actually done by my predecessor, is he moved us over to a voice over IP, phone provider for the church. And at the time, I didn't think much about it, but what that enabled was anybody who could install an app on their phone could answer the church phone when somebody called the church, and they didn't have to physically be sitting in the building to do it. So suddenly we could have office volunteers, who didn't have to sit in the office, but they could check the email and they could answer the phone and they could do all those sorts of things. So everything short of unlocking the door for people. And then we got a Ring doorbell so they could at least tell people they weren't there to unlock the door for them. So it's just amazing how that technology has come together. But I think a cloud-based church management system, and what church management systems, the primary focus of your church management system is, it organizes organizes all the data of your church, the data of your members. They typically keep track of your membership. They keep track of your contributions. They keep track of your events. And they usually facilitate your email, especially your internal email, and text communication with your people. Uh, Text messaging has, that is the most reliable way to get a hold of anybody, and that's our church, and I think that's pretty much every church. If we have something we need people to respond to, the best thing we can do is text them a link. If we have like a form or a survey we want them to fill them out, we text them a link. That will get a response. Email a little less so. Other options even maybe a little less so for that. Oftentimes, church management systems will also take care of your online giving. Have an option for that integrated in, which is nice. That obviously is, I don't know that we should be debating online giving anymore. Again, in the world post-COVID, I guess there was a time when we probably had to, but I will take money any way people want to give it to us. Most of those platforms too, by the way, now have a little feature that we do encourage people to use, where the person making the donation can even choose to add a little bit extra to cover the processing fee, because sometimes the processing fees are a challenge. Most any church giving system now will have a little button that lets the person elect to pick up the $2 for the processing fee or whatever it is, which is a nice feature. We don't require people to do it, but I've noticed that about half of our folks do. And we'll talk a little bit more about why other things you might want to think about doing that may not be completely obvious with a church management system. The other thing is easy to use websites. A website's easy to use and easy to update. That's been essential forever, but still continues to be. And then what's really kind of emerging now is, I think we all recognize that, if you want to be in communication with people, you need to somehow be on their smartphones. And texting is good for that. Email's okay for that, though sometimes. I saw a parishioner's smartphone the other day. He was showing me something, and I looked down at his little mail thing, and the little red number on the mail thing for unread messages was 5 digits. And I about lost my mind because I'm like, I couldn't live in that world. And I think my son, who's 16, checks his email about twice a week. So emails, it works. So the other thing that's emerging right now is this move toward, churches having their own apps, which allow for press communications to happen, allows you to do a little bit more interaction that way. And we'll talk about that again in a moment. There are vendors just now. You don't have to code anymore to do it. It's something that is fairly democratized as far as who can do it, as far as technical skill goes. But that is one of those places where, the tolling gets expensive. So cloud-based church management can be had for about $50 a month from a number of different vendors. I have my favorites, so that's within reach of most. If a website through Wix or Squarespace or, whatever, if that's the way you want to do it. I would say that and as far as that goes, if you're looking at that sort of product, there are places that if you kind of want something that's inexpensive but very easy to use, like the Squarespaces and Wix of the world have a lot of nice templates for churches now. You don't have to use a church-specific vendor anymore unless you want some of the additional services they provide. And I'll talk about a little more of that. And then finally, streaming and restreaming platforms. Obviously, that's a big deal for all of us. That became a big deal for worship. How do you do that well? And again, no end of solutions there. You can spend as much or as little as you want on those sorts of things. But they do almost all come with some sort of cost, either equipment, some upfront costs as equipment, or if you want to get into restreaming, where you stream to a service then stream to other places. So we use one of those so we can stream to Facebook and YouTube and all those places at the same time. There's a cost associated with those. And there's multiple vendors available. But when I kind of think of what are the basic infrastructure pieces for communication and organization right now, these are the kind of the top four that I see that are moving quickly into the world of, if not already essential, will be soon essential to every church. So that's kind of a high-level overview of that. I went very quickly, so I want to just pause there. Give you the chance to see if there's any questions, thoughts about that before we kind of dive into some actually more kind of specific scenarios around a couple of these. I'm curious how people think they're doing around some of this stuff. folks who maybe think they're, got the stuff in place and are using it well, or there's folks who maybe think they maybe don't and maybe struggling a little with some of this stuff. Anything specific you're excited about or specific maybe you're struggling with?
Jeremy, you talked about the importance of having email communication. And one of the things, how do you get the person who does have those 5,500 email messages in, how do you get them excited about reading their email?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of different ways. I have found anecdotally, so we use, for kind of our bulk mass communications, we use MailChimp, which lets you make some really nice templates, and things like that. There was a time, probably up until recently, where that felt valuable. That does not feel valuable today, or as valuable today. I think everybody's on MailChimp, everybody's on Constant Contact, everybody's getting that stuff all the time. That people are used to seeing it, and they immediately go, they immediately look at it and go, oh, that's just another ad. And so what we have moved towards when it comes to email is more kind of targeted. So one of the things that we can do through our church management system when we want to send an email, we can select the people we want to send an email to. And then in the email, you can basically essentially do like a mail merge, similar to what you do with Word. So you've ever done a mail merge in Word where you've got like a spreadsheet full of names and addresses, and you can say, make me 10 copies of this letter with this first name and last name. You can essentially do the same thing with the email system. And this is, I don't know if I want to give you this secret because it's kind of my trick, but that's okay. What I've discovered is if I use the system with mail merge and I put the person's first name in the subject line, so it's like first names like Mark, comma, wanted to make sure you saw this from the church. And then, because it's going to come, you can set like what reply email it comes to. So it may come from my email, it may come from, the office manager's email or whatever. But now don't all go doing that because then it won't work anymore. No, I'm just kidding. But that seems to be the thing. And actually, I've noticed that a lot of political advertising has switched over to that, where it's, they're a little less slick and a little less whatever and a little bit more. So what we have found actually gets people to, especially if we want them to do something like register for something or fill out a survey or whatever, if the subject line has their name in it, usually just their first name, message for you, whatever. And then, if the message is short, hey, we need you to do this thing. The thing that we have learned nobody reads is like the Friday email digest that's everything going on in the church. Nobody reads it. We get like we were doing that through MailChimp, so you get a little more analytics on it. I think we were getting like a 30% open rate, and, people were looking at it for maybe less than 10 seconds, which is not long enough to read it. And the reality is it's probably okay because, it's like, all information is available. Like if they want to know like when, our turkey dinner is, it's on the website, they can go look. So I would say that the tricks that we've used is first name in the email subject line, keep it short, and keep each email about one or maybe two things. The other thing that hopefully I'll remember when I talk about tagging in a minute, I'll hopefully remember to talk about that again, but that's the other way to do it, is to make sure it's as personalized to the person as possible. So that you're really only sending communication to people that you have a reasonable belief actually care about what it is you're about to say. Oh yeah, Susanna, yes. I've learned that equipment without a warranty is a pretty good investment. Yeah. So when it comes to equipment, as far as that goes, you kind of have to put things in one of two categories, which is, and that's the way I've always lived my life. You either spend the dollars for the thing that's going to work for a good long time and have a good warranty if it doesn't, or buy something you understand is disposable. And truthfully, if you spend $100 on something that should cost $1,000, and it works for a year, then you did good. So that's, that's the kind of decision point you have to make, especially if you're making infrastructure, especially if it's things like cameras, and equipment like that. I mean, those really come at two price points, which is disposable, or, you'll pass it down to your grandkids. But, that's what you got to do. All right. Any other questions before we move on? All right. Is anybody, I'm curious, does anybody have a cloud-based church management system you're using right now? Or a church management system, period, like Power Church or Church Windows or anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it, I'm sorry, who's saying that? Okay. Is it one that's like installed on a computer and lives on that computer? So we have ones like that. Okay. All right. So I will spoil the surprise. If you're looking, yep.
Well, I guess I'm interested in the upfront costs on this in order to utilize or exploit all of the capabilities that are available. Will you be discussing the costs on this?
We certainly can. And we may just sit here real quick. And I see somebody, Debbie was saying they use Power Church. Okay. So Power Church, I mean, that was a great kind of last generation product, and they've done a couple things to try to move it into the web-based world. Didn't work very well. So I will just throw out my standard recommendation, and I don't get paid, but my standard recommendation is Breeze Church Management. It is $50 a month. There is no upfront fee, and they will, for free, which most won't do, migrate your system from your existing Power Church, Church Windows, whatever it is that you're doing. They will migrate your data for you. Most places, that's a several $100 fee. They've been phenomenal to work with. They work with thousands and thousands of churches. They work with a lot of Methodist churches. They're very strong user groups, like on Facebook and other places where you get your questions answered, and things like that. So 2 years ago, I would have said hands down, they were the only one in the market. There are others who have come along since then. What is it? I think it's ACS. They bought Mission Insight. So they have a product that's come online. I think Tidely has a product that's come online that looks pretty similar. So there are other ones out there now. The big deal is you want something that lives on infrastructure you don't have to own or maintain. So that's one of the beauties. I mean, originally the beauty of the cloud-based system was it lived on computers somewhere else that you didn't have to take care of, right? As long as you have the internet, you could access it. Today, the beauty is anybody can access it from anywhere. The nice thing I do like about Breeze too is their $50 is a flat fee. It doesn't matter how big your church gets. They're not going to charge you more than that. They work with 50-person churches. They work with 10,000-person churches. So there are others now too, but really, and I think others do this too. Breeze even offers an app for your phone. So like if I get phone calls, say, hey, you need to go visit so-and-so. If they're at the hospital, I can get on my phone and look up in Breeze who's so-and-so, because sometimes I don't always know. And you can look at I'm like, you look at the picture, go, oh, it's that guy. So for church management systems, I mean, I still think, turnkey, they're the best. Somebody around you is already using them, and they have great support, phone support. They have the technology. Yes, that's Breeze. And they do, yeah.
Can you, Breeze, we have, everybody doesn't know what that is, right? So are we spelling it right?
Yes. So you're spelling it right. So I think it's Breeze is in a blowing breeze. Breeze CHMS Church Management System, breezechms.com. So
thank you.
They do, and for your $50 a month, you do get an online giving and a text to giving platform built in. So, I mean, It used to be you used to pay Vanco $70 a month just to have online giving. And now for $50 a month, you can get a whole church management system with online giving built in. They even have text to give, which is nice, where you actually assign you a phone number for you. And people can text that phone number and give you money once they get it set. It's pretty slick. And you can do online registrations, and I mean, really just manages your whole thing. So, and they'll give you a calendar. They give you a calendar that you can set up internally and manage, and then you get a public-facing calendar that people can subscribe to, or you can put on your website, whatever you want to do. As far as the website goes, if you're looking for just a website, I would, Squarespace, Wix, one of those, is, they have really nice templates. If that's all you're looking for, you just need a basic website. They have more tools than you will need. So they work fine, and they're again easy to use. And one of the secrets, the thing that I'm always in the market for on this kind of stuff is, what's the support look like, and how easy can I Google answers? So there's probably nothing in this world that you might want to do with your Squarespace, like with a Squarespace, where you can't just Google, how do I do this on Squarespace? And you will get the answer. That's just nice thing. Yes. So attendance. Yes. So Breeze will do your attendance. So when you set up an event in Breeze, you can do attendance along with it. They also have a kiosk mode. So we actually have an iPad that lives in a little kiosk outside of our sanctuary. And on Sunday morning, we just say, this is the Sunday morning that we're dealing with. This is the event that we're dealing with right now, this worship service on Sunday morning. And you can set it up for either individuals to just kind of scroll to the list and check themselves in, or currently, obviously, we don't want everybody, COVID and all that, touching this one thing. So now we have one of our ushers who stands there and basically checks people in on the tablet as they enter the sanctuary, and it works like the same way. And I think what I was going to admit to, you can set up forms similar to like how you might do like a Google form or something like that, but you can do a form in Breeze. That's how we have people who are watching from home register their attendance. There's an attendance form, or send in their prayer request. There's a prayer request form. So I have my iPad with me on Sunday morning. It's Joys and Concerns time. I just bring out the iPad and scroll through who's submitted a form, and half the time it's people sitting in the congregation, because we don't pass the mic anymore. We all know that. So they got it right. They can fill out a hand piece of paper, but people just fill it out on the app. All right, so let's talk a little bit specifics here. So here's what I would say. Churches that were able to live or were already living in the toll lanes had a lot of privileges when COVID came. Okay, and this is one of those places where the inequity showed. So, and I'll be honest, like my church had a lot of privilege around this. We were already streaming. We were already doing a bunch of stuff. We'd already moved over to Breeze. We already had all this stuff in the works, mostly because I'm me and I'm passionate about it. And I had some couple people on my church who were also passionate about it, and we wanted to see this done. So we were already walking down that path, which means when the stay-at-home order came on Thursday, Sunday we were streaming with multiple cameras because we were already doing it. We weren't doing it great, but we were doing it, and we spent 2 days. So we got this, instead of spending 2 days figuring out how to do it, we spent 2 days figuring out how to make it better. So even that first Sunday, though, if I watch the recording from that first Sunday now, I kind of twitch a little bit. It was actually pretty decent. Our online giving was already in place. We had those forms set up for online attendance and prayer requests day one. And we were also already podcasting. So we were podcasting our Sunday sermons. And then I had started doing like a midweek follow-up podcast, which is all the stuff I couldn't ramble about during the sermon because otherwise it'd be 30 minutes long. And that was in place. And podcasting actually became a really interesting thing during COVID because our participation in that upticked dramatically. It really felt people would take walks. They needed to get out of the house. They were, listening, needed to put their headphones on and listen to something while they were ignoring their kids, who were doing homework in the next room, whatever it was. That podcasting thing became an even bigger deal during COVID. Within a month, because we already had Breeze set up, and because we already had good data in Breeze, as we're going to talk about in a minute, It means we already knew we'd actually done an audit that fall and basically gone and around and made sure and checked with everybody. Especially, I mean, we're not a huge church, right? I mean, we're not 1,000 people, so we can do this. We went around and checked everybody. Is this your address? Is this your phone number? Is this, your email address? Is this your cell phone number? Can we have it? Most people were more than happy to give it to us. So because we had already done that, so the third Sunday of lockdown happened to be Palm Sunday, which was also going to be Communion Sunday. And we had already ordered the palm branches. So we're like, what are we going to do? So we went to Breeze. We organized everybody. We figured out everybody who lived, within a reasonable drive of the church, broke them into small groups of 10, packaged up little communion elements. I got some pictures I'll show you in a minute, and the things, and basically organized a bunch of people to go and deliver communion elements and palm branches to everybody for that first Palm Sunday, so that everyone could wave them at home. And actually, what we had them do, I actually didn't talk about this. So for Sunday morning, for worship on Sunday morning, we used a package called Proclaim, which is like Media Shout or ProPresenter or any of those, PowerPoint, better than PowerPoint, but it's like Media Shout or ProPresenter or one of those sorts of deals where it runs your slides on Sunday morning. Works great. It's also cloud-based, which is its kind of secret thing, which meant that I was sitting at home with my son at the coffee table where we were broadcasting worship from, because we were out of the building at that point. The person who normally would run slides just from the back of the sanctuary was at her home. And we had everybody at the beginning of the service wave their palm branches and take pictures, email them to our office manager, who added them to Proclaim from her home, which synced to Proclaim at our home during the worship service so we could show them at the end. Infrastructure. It's cool. I'm telling you, it lets you do cool stuff. It also means now, that and now it's just a great productivity tool for us because, if she's working from home one day, she can still work on the presentation. And and we had a guy who's a tech writer in the church. On Wednesday, he logs into the software from his computer at home and he goes through and proofreads it all for us so we don't have completely obvious spelling mistakes, which we were a little infamous for a while there, and kind of drove him nuts. So we're like, hey, you can fix that, Rich. If it really drives you crazy, you can fix it. Anyway, so we did that. We recognized we wanted to kind of we wanted to make sure we kept in contact with people. So again, we organized people into groups and solicited people to be shepherds. We organized all of our kids. We figured out where all our kids were and where they lived and everything like that and how many we had. Turned Sunday school into a kit delivery. And then we were already underway with confirmation and a couple things. So those all switched over to Zoom, which a lot of people did that. But the thing that I'm realizing that was unique, not necessarily unique, but the thing that was interesting for us at that time was because all the tools to do this were already in place, we weren't having to figure out the tools. We just had to figure out how to use the tools we had in a different way. We already had the data. We already knew where people lived. We already could put them on a map. We could already send text messages and emails to everybody. We could already organize folks. So our task was different than all the phone calls I was getting, which was everybody else trying to figure out how to get the infrastructure. And I think personally that so that definitely served us during that time for sure. But I also think that it's the case that, COVID was a different experience for us. It was tough because it was tough for everybody. Like it was tough for everybody and it was tough for us, but it was tough in a different way. And I'm grateful if we have to do it, that we got to do it the way that we did it. Because for us, it was just about how do we make this good? How do we do, it wasn't just how do we do this, it's how do we do this well? It was a lot of creative problem solving for a while there. But just having what you need was the big deal. So I want to do one kind of thing on Breeze, and then I'm going to pause for questions again. the thing that, one of the things, it's a simple thing, but once you kind of wrap your head around what you can do for you, it's so amazingly helpful. And it's the idea and ability to be able to basically take people and tag them. So just like you might tag a photo or, whatever, it tells you something about these folks. And so what a system like what that brings, really any modern CMS will do this. You have somebody, and then, but you need to, it's not enough just to know that person exists. You want to know about that person. You want to know who they are. This is how you do that more customized communication. So when I wanted to create a new working men's group, so I basically wanted to do a men's group specifically for men of working age who are still working. Because oftentimes you do a men's group in a church, you get the retired guys together for pancakes, on Saturday morning or whatever, and that's fine. And we do that too. But we realized that there was a different need amongst men who were of working age and that sort of thing. So in order to get that started, it actually became, a pretty easy thing to do. Because again, we'd already done the audit. And one of the things that we've done in the audit is ask people to verify their birthdays so that we could send them birthday greetings. But it became a pretty simple search to say, give me everybody in our system who's a guy, who's between the ages of, 23 and 60, I think is what we started with. And then I got a list of, X number of people. And then I could take all those people, and then the system spit out a list of people. And I said, okay, assign all those people to a tag that I'm going to call, I think it's under adult ministries and small groups. There's a tag under there called working age men's group. I can just assign them all there. And so now I don't have to broadcast something to the whole church that 70% of them aren't going to care about. I can start talking directly to that group of people. And over time, I can fine tune it. If I miss somebody, I can add them. If I figure out that, I got somebody in here who's really not interested, I can take them out. But I can email those people directly. I can email them. I can text them, or, I can print out little things with their name on to have it after church, whatever I want to do, print out address labels with their name on it, whatever it is. And I can do the same things for parents in Sunday school who have kids in Sunday school. Because we did VBS registration, that's a pretty big deal for our church, VBS. We get all kinds of people in the community from VBS. Well, we did VBS registration through Breeze. Everybody registered VBS went into Breeze. All those families and all that kid, all that information went into Breeze. And I've got a tag that says, these are everybody who came to VBS. So 2 years ago, we didn't do it last year, COVID, but 2 years ago, we pulled a report, like, give me a list of everybody who's here for VBS. And we sent each of them, kind of a nice little flyer, basically saying, hey, the same people who plan VBS, they plan Sunday school. If your kid had a good time at VBS, they'd probably have a good time at Sunday school too. And that's going to start on September 4th or whatever. Come on down. So we have all kinds of like administrative tags, who's on this committee, who's on that committee, communicating your committees is really useful. But also who's taken any adult study. So if you take an adult study, or a book study in our church, you're going to be in a tag. So when I do the next one, I can say, hey, dear Mark, I know you went to this book study with me. I'm going to offer this one in September. I thought you might be interested. If you are, here's the registration link. People will open that email. And the nice thing is these are yours. You can do what you want with them. Okay, so all right, so one, having a church management system is important. Two, having good data is important. It doesn't help if the data is no good. It's not doing any good. And really, and that's all about, if you have one, I'm blessed to. If you have a retired librarian, put the retired librarian in charge of making sure the data in the system is good. Just print it off and give it to her and say, hey, can you, just like, names, addresses, phone numbers, no confidential giving stuff. They don't need to know any of that. Names, address, phone numbers. Hey, can you check and figure out, make sure all this is good? They will return to you a week, little corrections, and it will be the best data you've ever had. Anywho, the numbers of your congregation being engaged, increased, held steady, or decreased? Increased. So the question is, how's the engagement been? We've grown. we grew during COVID. Numerically, as far as the number of people participating with us, we've grown. Participation in across the board, participation has been high in a lot of things. How people participate have changed. I let a Thursday night. I leave what I call my Thursday night deeper dive, where we basically explore whatever scripture we explore on Sunday. We explore it as in a Bible study setting. That drew a handful of folks. When COVID happened and we had to move it onto Zoom, I would say increased participation. That increased by about 50% in total number, and people were far more consistent in participating. And this fall, we tried to go back to in-person, and we did 2 sessions in person where almost nobody came, and now we're back to Zoom because that's what everybody told me they wanted to do. And when we did a Zoom one, suddenly my numbers are back up again. So the thing we're trying to figure out now is, what do people want to do in person, and what would they rather do that way? What I did notice is that a lot of our, and then same with book studies. Book studies on Zoom have been a pretty big success, especially reaching anybody with children. Coming out at night when you've got children to put to bed is pretty hard. But when you can put the bed, close the door, and walk to the next room, people will do that. And you didn't ask, but I'll tell you, our giving is up as well. 2020 was a great year for us. 2021's not as great, but fine. So, and I will tell you about that. Digital tools, properly used, enable real world ministry. Because at the end of the day, that's the point, right? So I am actually not a believer in everything being online by any means. And what we discovered was, by properly using and exploiting the digital tools we had to organize and communicate, allowed us to have far more safe interactions during COVID. A lot of one-on-one, a lot of you stand in your doorway, I'll stand on the front porch, those sorts of interactions, especially in those early days, allowed us to facilitate a lot of those where it wasn't me doing it, but we had a lot of people visiting a lot of other people in those kind of safe, responsible sort of ways, that we actually increased our ability to kind of reach out and touch. And we only really could have done that as well as we did it if we did with the tools and the data that we had. Because what that did is it made sure we didn't miss anybody. All right, I want to pause there for any other questions. Did I have knowledgeable people already in your church, or did I need to train them? I had people who were technically literate. I mean, they were literate with technology. Nobody really knew the church management system. I would say our finance people, I would say our finance secretaries, the average age of our finance secretaries is probably about 75, and they took to it so easily and talked about how much easier it was from what we were doing. Most of these tools are pretty easy to use. If you can get around on Google, on the internet, I mean, the nice thing about the browser-based things right now is most people are comfortable with a web browser. So we did do a little bit of training for that. We have actually had a number of our churches in our areas come to us who've adopted Breeze or one of the other systems we use. They come to us and we have trained them. So my guess is if you poke around, there's some church in your area that's already doing it. Some of this stuff, and maybe a resource to talk to. But yeah, I would say folks have taken to it. I also think that I think 2 years ago it would have been a little more difficult. I think today everybody Zoomed with their grandkids. I mean, it's I think the level of technical proficiency around just the kind of the basic stuff is high because we all had to learn it. We all had to. Now we did a couple of things. I mean, we collected, people's, kind of 2 generations old iPads they were never using again, and reconditioned them and handed them out to church members, and who still wanted to join the Zoom calls but didn't have the right, didn't have a computer to be able to do it, or things like that. We did a little bit of that kind of upcycling kind of thing too. But we got people what they needed. Other questions? So this is what I want to talk to you real quick. I mean, we'll have big time again too. I think. I don't know. How we doing for time? Oh, okay, we're fine. So this is what I mean about increasing touch. So this was our first kit delivery, which was our Palm Sunday kit. That became a monthly thing. After that, when Easter came, we had the lilies, so we had to deliver them. So we went and we delivered the lilies. We took pictures, and then we could show those pictures in church on Sunday morning. People really, really appreciated that. We did a thing. One of the kits we sent home had these crosses that you could peel off and stick things to or color. So we did that. We had people do that and return them to the church, either through the mail or we had a drop-off box outside the church. This was all still during lockdown. And then we pinned them to the wall behind me on Sunday morning. We had, we just had those go up, and every morning, every Sunday we'd show pictures of the ones we received that Sunday. I think we did this for several weeks. And then they just kind of went on this collage wall that became the background behind me. For folks, and I don't know how many, it was 80 of the dang things, I think. I don't know, quite a bit. What was interesting, I don't know of another church, and maybe you all have one down there. I don't know of another church who lived into the delivery thing as much as we did. So what we basically did is we organized people, because, once you've got a list of addresses, there's any number of services you can plug those into that will give you a map, right? And say, here's where everybody lives. We're a small enough community, people kind of generally know what it is. So we had a volunteer who just kind of spent a day taking this list of people that we all knew lived in the area and were fairly active in our church and we wanted to continue to reach out to, organize them into, 8 to 10 household chunks. And then we looked and kind of figured out, and we recruited a driver for each of those chunks of town, and said, hey, on Saturdays at 1:00, will you come to the church, pick up a pallet of stuff and drop it off to, 8 of your neighbors. And initially the excuse was the communion, even though I don't think anybody actually used those rice crackers. I'm sure they brought their own bread. But that was the excuse, was we needed to send communion home. But we never just sent communion home. We always sent something else home with it. It was either a project, it was a gift, it was, we sent home a list of teachers in our school district and had everybody write out cards or notes for those teachers, and bring those back. We did the same thing for our first responders. So sometimes it was a service project, sometimes it was like an arts and crafts project like the cross, sometimes it was just like a little gifty thing that went with the sermon series we were working on, whatever it was. And if you had kids, that's when you got your Sunday school kit as well. So you got a Sunday school kit, and all that kind of stuff. We spent very little money on it. Our drivers loved it because it gave them something to do. The thing we discovered very quickly is people wanted something to do. They wanted something practical to do. They also figured out that they had a lot of neighbors that went to the church. They didn't know where their neighbors and didn't know they went to our church. And so a lot of great relationships are formed there. You got a nice check-in with folks. People got to see some folks, and all this kind of stuff. And this is all facilitated, through Tags on Breeze, because it's a 2-click process to say, give me mailing labels with every one of these, with everybody on this list, and then we take those mailing labels with the address, you just stick it on top of the box, that you're sending home, and you basically hand somebody a box of stuff and say, take this to these addresses, and it's a little more work than that. And sometimes we got a little too creative. Frankly, it worked so well that even though 2/3 of our congregation is back to us in person and we don't deliver communion anymore, and we haven't for a few months, because if you are home, people have figured out they just get their own stuff. That's fine. Some of our drivers came to us and said, we kind of miss doing that. Are you planning to do it again? We'd like to. And we realized that there was a number of people that we weren't, touching as often. I mean, that sounds weird, I guess, but that we weren't, that we knew were out there, but we were kind of missing that interaction piece with them. And we're like, oh, okay, that's not good. So this last Sunday, to go along with the sermon series, we basically made these little dried soup kits. And we delivered those, and we said, hey, on Saturday. And then we said, hey, Sunday night or whatever, make soup. Here's, all the seasonings and everything you need. Add your own chicken, be creative, do what you want to do. So my Facebook feed yesterday and today has been full of people posting pictures of the soup they made, which is great. It's free advertising. You can't pay for that. And I would say there was probably about four couples or families that we had not seen in a good long time that got a delivery on Saturday that showed up at church on Sunday. And I think a lot of that was, that the thing of the church coming to you. Like it was this very physical expression of, we know you're out there. We still care about you, and I just kind of assume people are watching online or whatever. I mean, if I don't hear from anybody for a little while, so maybe that's what they're doing. But it's that kind of additional kind of in touch piece where we can like, hey, here's what's going on. FYI, we still care. So what ended up being like, I don't know, like $1 a bag to put together these kits. I think we delivered 130 of them to, different, one per household. It wasn't a small undertaking. It wasn't a huge undertaking. It didn't cost a ton of money. And it was mostly volunteer hours, and everybody and every driver but one, because there's always one, but every driver but one, talked about how excited it was to do it and how they really liked being able to get out and see people and and all that sort of stuff. So it worked out great. But again, this is the kind of level. I mean, the nice thing is the logistics of putting this together is, assembling the kits and everything notwithstanding, like the logistics of organizing people and putting them in little groups and all that kind of stuff. Once you've done it, it all lives and breathes. So all I can do is update it. So every once in a while we look at it and go, do we still need to for this person? We need to add that person. The best part is we actually had 3 new families in the last 3 weeks join or kind of start showing up. And because we have that person at the door who does attendance, we at least have their names. We were able to say, hey, we're doing this thing on Saturday. Would you mind giving us your address so we can include you? They're like, oh, you want to include us? I'm like, well, of course we want to include you. And I bet you I bet you they all stick. I bet more of them stick than otherwise would. And actually we had a visitor this Sunday and I talked about the soup during my sermon. And one of my gals was running up to go and say, hey, I know you're new here this week, and I know we talked about this. So here's yours, since we obviously didn't know to deliver to you. So here, I'll give you yours too, so you can also, join in the fun. So hopefully we'll see them again. All right. Okay. Before I need burning questions. 15 minutes right now. Okay, I know. Geez, here I thought I was going to go the full time. So let me run through this real quick, and then we can end with a pretty robust question and answer. So what's next? We've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I've talked to a lot of my friends and colleagues, both locally and across the connection about what are we doing? Like, we've learned so much. What are we doing next? What does this look like? Where are we going? Things have changed that are not going to unchange. So my thinking is, and where my leadership of the church is thinking is area that we're living into the reality that we expect 1/3 of our congregation is going to remain online for Sunday mornings. It may not be the same 1/3. And what I expect to see is people that maybe were 2-3 times a month in person kind of people are probably going to be more like once a month, twice a month kind of in person people, and then the other time online. I do know from some survey work we did of our congregation about 6 months ago, and it could have shifted by now. I actually think people are more consistently attending now than they were before. Between the two, not as consistently attending in person as they were before, but consistently attending between the two than they were before. And I would say the number of people who, at a minimum, will either watch the sermon video on YouTube or listen to the podcast of it just so they don't kind of miss out. I tend to be a serious preacher, which helps with that. So they, sometimes you need to know the last Sunday to make sense of the next one. But the number of people engaged in that has gone up tremendously too. So actually, I think people's consistency is but whether it was in person or not, it's fine. Actually, kind of works out well for us because pre-COVID, we were kind of filling up our sanctuary and we weren't sure if we were going to start a second service or whatever it was. So our sanctuary is not full anymore, which is both good and bad, I suppose. But we're figuring about 1/3 of our folks on any given Sunday are going to be online. So which means we have to care about that experience. And we will continue. We make not necessarily compromises, but we do make concessions sometimes in Sunday mornings about what we do or don't do. And really, we do tend to think about, is that going to translate to online well? And sometimes it just doesn't, and you just have to live with it. But you do have to respect the fact that there's a third of your folks are on the other end of that camera. And if you're going to do something that's going to take 10 minutes and really not translate to online, you really got to ask yourself if you're really going to do that. Or is there a way we can do it differently that translates better? We have cleaned up our transitions so much. It's like boom, 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 boom. Our worship service has gone from basically consistently being like an hour 10. It is now more like 50 minutes. And it's not that we really cut any content. It's just that we kind of cut a couple things we probably didn't need to be doing anyway and just got the transitions down. Nobody has complained that the service is 20 minutes shorter. Nobody's complained about that. All right. So we streamline our services. I think that's going to stay. We are looking at more, kind of like on-demand options, basically opportunities to engage whenever you want to. We did a little bit of experiments on this during Lent, where we offered a daily devotion every day that was available online or through our app. And through the app, you had the ability to chat about it. Whenever it is you happen to read it, you could post a reflection about it in the chat. That was pretty successful during Lent, especially when it was devotions that individual congregants wrote. So if you knew you were reading something that somebody in the congregation wrote, that seemed to be that pretty hard. We did an experiment over the summer with some longer form topical podcasts where we basically touched on different topics. Some of those people solicited. That was popular amongst our people, and it's also popular to be shared. I heard several comments of, "Oh, my daughter who lives in so-and-so listened to that," or whatever. And they really, really appreciated that. So that has gone, those things have gone, like the podcast and stuff has been gone from just something that was kind of in the nice to do if we can category into more of the essential category. And then continuing to offer online Zoom-based classes and studies. That will continue to happen. We will continue to do in-person ones as well. There's a certain group that, wants to do those. That group tends to be the ones that wants to come at like 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. And because people, don't drive at night or whatever. I have, FYI, when I worked for the conference and we had multi-$1,000 AV setups for video conferencing, when I did it at the church, we did DIY stuff. I have never seen hybrid classes work where half the people in the room and half the people are on Zoom. It's almost impossible to have a conversation that way. So they really need everybody's on Zoom, or almost everybody's in the room. You can bring in maybe one or two people on Zoom and have everybody else be in the room, but maybe one or two persons with you, in person, and everybody else is on Zoom. If you figure it out, please tell me how you did it, because I have never. We got nice little Bluetooth speakerphones. We did all kinds of stuff. Doesn't work. Okay. And then finally, the thing we're kind of exploring is, okay, we're the church, gathering together. To be the church together is important. Sunday morning is no longer practicable for people. In the United States, if you work, a third of the people who work on Sunday mornings. So you got that to deal with too. Now it's pre-COVID. So we're looking about what are the new in-person gathering options. How do we get people to offer something that maybe isn't the entire worship experience? The thing we're kind of playing with right now, so this is really kind of in dreaming experiment mode, that we're looking to launch here soon, is, what if we set up an in-person, opportunity for people to gather where we had worship and prayer and conversation. And, we did it on like a Tuesday night or a Thursday night. Maybe we do it out in the community somewhere. We do it at a coffee shop, whatever. And the assumption is that basically you've heard the sermon. Basically the assumption is you heard it on the podcast, you heard it on the video, you watched the live stream, whatever, or maybe you were in person. And instead of it being a place to come hear it again, it's a place to discuss. Discussion around whatever the topic for the week is, all that kind of stuff. Still have the music component because music's important to us in our church. So have the component of prayer, those sorts of things. We'll absolutely, ask people for money. That's how you know it's worship, because we asked you for money, and that sort of thing. Okay, that's a whole lot. I just threw you all. Questions?
I have a question, but I haven't worked it out to make it smooth. But
Deb, wait a second. We've lost Jeremy.
he says his internet went down. I'm really sorry. So Carla, does that mean he's gone?
That means he's gone. Yes.
Oh, okay.
One of the things I found very interesting that he talked about was how so many of the things that he started during COVID, they're actually continuing and finding success in bringing people back who've been out for a little bit of time. I thought that was really interesting. When someone hadn't been around for a while, they used some of the steps that they had done during COVID, and some people started to show up again. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
Ruth,
Well,
you have your hand up.
I did. I was thinking about what my church did during COVID is they delivered a paper heart with a design and the name of our church on it. And we were to color it. And there would be a driver come by to take our picture with it. And they handed us a cookie of the same shape. And then they took the heart back to church. And ever since now, we've got different people posted in the narthex of the picture they took on our porch holding the heart. So that's kind of fun. It's a lasting thing. It was keeping our social distance. We had our masks on, but it was a fun project.
Well, I had asked him and he didn't get to address that. He kept saying we did this and we did that, but somebody had to put the boxes together, the stuff in the boxes. And I asked him, what committees or teams were involved in that, but he had so much he wanted to finish up. He sort of said he'd get to that and then he didn't. But somebody, whether it was missions or worship or, who it was.
You know the answer to that. It's all the busy people.
UMW.
True.
Last year in our church, it was the busy people that took out the Advent packets, one for people to open each week and different things. What's interesting is this year we've had people say that they want to volunteer, but they don't want long-term, but they're afraid of long-term commitment, basically. So there's probably a lot of people that feel the same way. Some of our people have said they're just kind of tired. But if it's a one-shot project, we come and we put something together, they would love to do that. So I think opening it up, for one, we'd have to know what we're going to do well in advance. Sometimes we don't know to the last minute we're going to do something and that doesn't work out. But if we have some notice, we can put out, hey, we want people, we'll drop off the kids, or you can pick them up on Sunday, take them home, bring them back the following week. We have people that are willing to do that. So we're hoping to tap into that this year for Advent and things.
Javier, you have your hand up.
Oh, yes. I was thinking as well that with the Breeze program and the attendance, I was thinking about the attendance pads that churches have and how that has been very helpful and practical for many, many years. And now looking to a post-COVID era, if now this is the future of using a iPad or a tablet where one can just check in the names, register, and I think that directly goes into you can put it into your system and the membership roles, and it'd probably be easier. But I think it's also going to be difficult for many congregations to do that, shift or change. So we'll see.
I did think about having a paper copy. I mean, is that valuable, or is that something that just gets shredded or recycled after the numbers are tallied? You know, then you have some record loving people that never let a slip of paper go. I also think it's good for people to be conditioned to using technology. And it's because it is more efficient. So,
Happening in the doctor's offices right now.
Yeah. The downside of it is or the pro of using the attendance pads is that they still have, those columns that says, I would like a visit from the pastor. But I mean, maybe that could be also put into the digital form. But yeah, I guess we just need to think of ways of doing that.
Right, because in a digital form, it could go directly to a calendar and it could be set up immediately. So
yeah,
that's a plus, but the person with the schedule has to make that information known. And too many reschedules is not good. So,
I have a question. He said he was going to explain streaming and re-streaming. What is re-streaming?
I don't know if it's showing again the service or whatever you recorded. I don't know if that is what restreaming is.
Yeah, he mentioned real briefly that to restream it, you've got to have the technology to either send it to Facebook or YouTube or something like that. So I think that's what he meant by restreaming, and that you would have to invest in whatever it takes to do that. And it's too bad that his internet went down.
So
there isn't a charge. Our church and the nearby United Methodist Church our services are on Facebook, and it's free, and they're there and they remain there. I think they remain there for a year.
Oh, okay.
So that is, if that is restreaming, then that means that they stayed there to be seen again.
So when I look it up on the internet, it says Restream is a cloud multi-streaming service. It allows users to simultaneously stream video content to multiple platforms and social media. So you stream it the first time as your live stream, and then when I think restreaming it is putting it out on other platforms that other people might be more comfortable using.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody like me that doesn't have Facebook could watch it on YouTube. It's technically a restream from the live feed on Facebook.
Yeah. That sounds like it to me too, that we're on Facebook, but if we had that, it would also be going to other venues other than Facebook.
It could be.
Could be.
It doesn't do that unless you set it up to do that.
Well, that's when we'd need that Breeze or somebody.